Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video looking at work, poverty and welfare, focusing on definitions of poverty. In this video, we're going to examine how sociologists look to define poverty and outline some of the advantages and disadvantages of using each definition. There are four key definitions of poverty to examine when looking at work, poverty and welfare on the AQA A-level specification, and these are listed below. Firstly, absolute poverty. This accounts for the basic necessities individuals need to survive, for example, food and shelter. The second definition we're going to examine is relative poverty, sometimes referred to as relative deprivation, and how individuals define themselves as being in poverty based upon comparing themselves to others. Thirdly, there is subjective poverty, and this refers to the way in which individuals perceive themselves to be in poverty. As you can see with the second and third definitions, these are less objective measures and take into account individuals' perceptions of poverty. Finally, we need to examine social exclusion, an aspect of poverty rather than a definition, and this looks at how people are excluded from society based upon their financial situation. Let's look at these in more detail. Firstly, absolute poverty. This is defined as being the inability to afford even the most basic necessities in order to survive: food, shelter, heating. While figures for absolute poverty in the UK are thankfully lower than official estimates of poverty, there are still significant numbers of people who struggle to feed themselves and their families whilst paying rent and utilities. Broader definitions of absolute poverty also look at the ability to access services that will enable individuals to meet these demands. For example, access to the internet in order to obtain benefits or afford school uniforms or travel for children to engage in education. One benefit of using absolute poverty as a measure is that it can be compared quite objectively, and this allows for international comparisons. Of course, different goods and services cost different amounts in different countries, but this can be adjusted for the cost of living in each nation. Early measurements of absolute poverty were conducted by social reformer Benjamin Rowntree, who, inspired by his father Joseph Rowntree, set out to measure a list of essential goods and recorded how many families could afford these. The work of Benjamin and his father is continued today by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, one of the leading charities examining poverty in the UK. A second definition of poverty, and one more commonly used in contemporary society, is that of relative poverty, often referred to as relative deprivation. This is a subjective measure that examines how individuals compare themselves to others in society and the extent to which they feel deprived. This is often achieved through comparison between those in higher and lower social classes, with measurements taken on how deprived people are in comparison to others, based upon activities, goods and services they use. The concept of relative deprivation first came into usage with Townsend's study into relative poverty in the 1970s, comparing the percentage of people across 3 towns and how their lifestyles were impacted by their economic situation. This measure is not solely based upon the basic essentials, but includes elements that are interpreted as being desirable in society. This measure is useful as it allows researchers to compare the extent to which economic and social inequality in society causes stark contrasts between those that have and those that have not. Subjective poverty, much like relative poverty, is based upon an individual's interpretation of how deprived they feel and what level of income they require to stay out of poverty. As it is based on comparisons of how people feel about their economic situation, perhaps unsurprisingly, it records higher figures of poverty in the UK. For example, in 2012, the Poverty and Social Exclusion Survey found that almost 30 million people in the UK are suffering from financial insecurity, and almost 18 million suggest that they struggle to afford adequate housing. Compared to other poverty figures, this grossly overestimates the scale of poverty in the UK. However, it does highlight the fear of falling into poverty that many people in the UK have, wondering whether they are financially secure, despite earning above the median income. A further aspect of poverty that needs to be considered when looking at definitions of poverty is social exclusion. This is a wider measure of the impacts of poverty that examines the extent to which people are able to engage in day-to-day activities that others see as normal. This includes a broad range of activities through which an individual's economic situation can influence involvement. Access to education, employment opportunities, such as the ability to travel for work or undertake necessary training, crime rates, both offending and victimization, healthcare and life chances, and access to services and opportunities for cultural and social enrichment. It's a more holistic measure of poverty, focusing not only on economic deprivation, but also on the ability to play a full and active role in society. Social exclusion is an important concept, with sociologists Lee and Young arguing that social exclusion can lead to crime, something we'll cover when looking at left realist approaches to crime. There are significant issues with defining poverty, with differing measures of poverty reporting wildly different figures for the extent of poverty in the UK. One issue is the subjective nature of poverty, with individuals having varying levels of knowledge about whether their social and economic situation means they are in poverty. Many who are in poverty may not claim to be so because of the social stigma attached, while others may not realise that their lack of access to further education or better employment opportunities means they fall into one definition or another. Furthermore, some definitions may lack objectivity and become difficult to compare both culturally and over time. For example, in Townsend's study, not eating meat was a sign of relative deprivation. Yet with the increasing awareness of diet and nutrition, as well as personal beliefs, not eating meat is a choice for individuals. Furthermore, what is deemed as a necessity for one person may not be deemed necessary for others. During the COVID pandemic, internet access became an essential good for many in order to be able to work, yet it is not classified as essential for others. The use of online platforms for claiming benefits and booking appointments makes this a necessity in 2022, but this would not have been the case before 2020. Furthermore, rapid changes in economic and social situations may lead to changes in definitions. For example, both the cost of living crisis in 2022 and the COVID pandemic will have large-scale effects on people's own perceptions of what poverty is, as costs rise and/or employment becomes more insecure. This could lead to more individuals fearing or perceiving themselves to be in poverty, or not realizing the extent of their financial situation as these rapid changes occur. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video looking at work, poverty and welfare, focusing on definitions of poverty. Thanks for watching.